welcome to a special interview for Cover Story. I have with me Dr. Sanjay Baru. He's a policy analyst, political commentator. He's also been the media advisor to Dr. Manmohan Singh and written several books, including, of course, The Accidental Prime Minister. And welcome, Dr. Baru, and congratulations. A new book is coming out by the end of the month.
That's right.
Succession of the Successful. I think you're talking about the flight of capital out of New Delhi. I'd like to just get a brief curtain raiser on that also. But first, I want to talk to you about Pakistan. I was reading a column you wrote recently about how it's now time to reset and reassess the way we look at Pakistan, the way the world is looking at Pakistan. So, can you just tell us a bit about what you wrote?
Well, my basic argument has been that for the last 10 years, particularly in the last 5, 6 years, somehow we've taken the view that we don't need to have anything to do with Pakistan. See, once both the countries withdrew their ambassadors, the high commissioners, all kinds of restrictions have been placed on trade, on movement of people, on civilian contact, etc., etc. And people started actually arguing seriously that India can live without Pakistan. In fact, I was quite shocked when the Observer Research Foundation produced an article, I think, written by Professor Harsh Pant, which the headline was that something like, uh, Pakistan doesn't matter that for India. India has kind of sidelined Pakistan. Now, this kind of thinking has gained ground. Um, and somehow we imagined that this would be viewed as an insult in Pakistan, would be viewed as snubbing them, and then maybe they'll change their behavior because they want to have a better relationship with India. That's point number one. Point
Hmm.
number two is that we imagined that our relations with the rest of the world were so good
Yeah.
that even if we don't have particularly good relations with some of our neighbors, whether it is Pakistan or Bangladesh or even Nepal, that
In
it's
fact,
all
all
right.
of our neighbors in the current state.
Exactly. No, so that's all right. The world wouldn't bother that we can continue to have excellent relations with United States, European Union, Russia, everybody else, and worse, we can be leader of the global South. Which was a slogan at the time of the G20, even if we are not leader of South Asia. And I think that was a completely wrong way of looking at our neighborhood, of looking at Pakistan, and of looking at our relations with the world.
But what went wrong? It's not like the prime minister hasn't tried. If you remember the first swearing in, the people he reached out to were the SAARC countries. He made that visit to Nawaz Sharif. So it's not that, Modi hasn't tried.
No, no, I mean inviting Nawaz Sharif to the swearing in and the dropping in at his daughter's wedding, those are just visible gestures. I think what you need is a far more hard nosed conversation on issues that are critical to us. I mean, that is, for example, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had Sati Lamba, the former High Commissioner in Pakistan, the back channel. Before that, Prime Minister Vajpayee had, a back channel between R.K. Mishra in Delhi
Hmm.
and Tariq Aziz in Islamabad. So both prime ministers were trying to, acquire some understanding of the other side quietly below the radar, and not through these flamboyant gestures of inviting somebody for a swearing in or dropping in uninvited at a wedding dinner. No, those are only visible gestures. But I don't think there was any real substantial engagement. I cannot recall right now, but I think when the foreign minister, Mr. Jashankar, went for a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which was last year, that was his first visit to Pakistan. So I don't think we've had any other ministerial visits to Pakistan. So our level of engagement with Pakistan was minimal, and we assumed that we don't have to engage Pakistan. We can get along with the rest of the world. I think that was a mistake.
And this new normal, has that made things worse? Because now there is really no scope for conversation, and any attack would be interpreted as an cry for war. So the situation, have we painted ourselves in a bit of a corner?
No, in fact, I have a completely opposite view. I
Okay.
think the time has come for the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, to set his ego aside and come to terms with the fact that he has to maintain good relations with our neighborhood. For
Hmm.
example, India could take the initiative to revive SARC. I mean, we completely shut down the SARC shop And we said BIMSTEC is our regional partner with Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Thailand, etc. But our relations with Bangladesh have taken a nosedive.
Yeah.
But I do think South Asia is an important region for India. And in fact, the government has a stated neighborhood first policy. I mean, the foreign minister keeps talking about a neighborhood first policy. Now, you can't have a neighborhood first policy and not engage one of your important neighbors. So I think the Indian leadership should set egos aside, take stock of our security concerns, take stock of our individual relations with each of our neighbors, and actually have a new strategy that reaches out to the neighborhood, that has an engagement with the neighborhood. I'm not saying that will solve all the problems, but at least the rest of the world will say, okay, now India is taking itself seriously. India is doing something in order to mend fences with its neighbors, which is, in my judgment, an important foreign policy intervention.
So should India have sent the delegations that we sent out? Should we have sent it some to our? You write also in your column, I think.
I think it was a complete waste of time. I have no idea why, many intelligent people went on it. I guess the opposition could not say no, because
Hmm.
if they had said no, then that would have been a talking point for the government, saying that, look, we are reaching out to them.
Anti-national.
Yeah,
Hmm.
anti-national. We are reaching out to them, and they are not willing to. So I think the opposition was caught in a corner, and it was a trick played. So if you want to look at it purely in political terms, it was a clever political trick. But if you want to look at it in diplomatic terms, I think first of all, it's a huge slap on Indian diplomacy, that when something like the 3 day conflict between India and Pakistan happens, if your own diplomats, your own ambassadors cannot explain the Indian viewpoint to the rest of the world, I mean, what kind of diplomats do we have around the world? You know, I mentioned in one of my columns the example of Naresh Chandra when he was ambassador in Washington, reaching out to Henry Kissinger after the Pokhran Shakti nuclear tests in May 1998. As you know, the Americans were very unhappy. They imposed economic sanctions. The Japanese imposed economic sanctions. Many European countries imposed economic sanctions. And the Indian economy, finance ministry was worried about the impact on the Indian economy. But Naresh Chandra picked up the phone, spoke to Henry Kissinger, and said, Mr. Kissinger, what do you think of our decision to go nuclear? And Kissinger said, well, I can understand from your point of view, it makes sense,
Hmm.
because you got China next door. So Naresh Chandra said, are you willing to say this to the media? And
Hmm.
Kissinger said, okay. So he immediately called CNN, told them Kissinger is willing to give you an interview on India's nuclear test. And it was all over television. So even before the United States government could officially respond to those nuclear
Isn't.
tests, someone as influential and important as Henry Kissinger supported the Indian nuclear tests. And I think that, in a sense, set the framework. So,
Hmm.
if you have a good diplomat who's thinking on his feet, who can reach out to influential people in other countries, then you don't need to send this jing bang lot of members of parliament who are having a good meal, banquets, and singing songs. And, it's a good junket. I mean, I envy, particularly those who went to some interesting parts of the world. you know,
Yeah.
I envy.
But some two things. One, of course, when you were talking about the equations, there was also the Jaswant Singh stroke Talbot equation also. So, is it that the leaders of heft, people who have that kind of who can pick up the phone and talk to their counterparts, is the bench strength missing in the Modi government? And the second question: the countries that were went, we didn't go to our immediate neighborhood. Should we have done that?
Well, I think we should have. I mean, I think Mr.
You're
Sham
right.
Saran, a former foreign secretary, has written a column saying we should have reached out to our neighbors as well, and he knows that, right? But on this whole issue of bench strength and relations to the world, I have a more fundamental, argument,
Hmm.
which is to say that uh, there is a gap that has developed in the last 10 years between our perception of ourselves and the world's perception of us. You know, again,
Explain.
it is Sham Saran who wrote a brilliant column about 12 years back in 2013
Hmm.
in the Business Standard, where he called India what he called a premature power, by which he meant that India has a high profile, it's the world's largest democracy, it has a sizable economy. Even then, 10 years back, it was in the top 10 economies of the world, and Indians are doing well globally, so there was certain profile, etc., etc. So there is some kind of a global expectation from India because of that profile. But India's ability to deliver is limited by the size of its economy, by its fiscal, incapabilities, by our share of world trade, which is still very low. Therefore, there are certain economic inadequacies that come in the way of our being able to play a global role, which many people expect because of our profile,
Mm.
right? Now,
Yeah.
given that contradiction between your profile and your capability, somehow till Manmohan Singh, we managed it. I mean, after all, even during Mr. Vajpayee's time, we managed this internal contradiction. But I think where Mr. Modi went wrong, and Jaishankar too, was making exaggerated claims about India's place in the world. You know,
Mm.
we are a rising power. We are a leader of the global South. We are a member of the G20. Bada tamasha.
Vishwaguru. Mm.
Yeah, and now that we are the third largest or fourth largest economy in the world, all these exaggerated claims, which I can understand, are made by a political party to impress their vote base. And if you keep it at that level, it's okay. But to give the impression to the rest of the world that somehow we have now kind of arrived, and that comes through the arrogance of our diplomacy, the way we speak to the Europeans, the way we speak to the even to the Russians, the way we speak to the West, the way we speak to our neighbors. There's an element of arrogance that has entered Indian diplomacy. I think this is hurting us. I think that is why we need a reset. We need new thinking on how to deal with the world, how to deal with our neighbors, how to deal with countries which are a threat to us. I mean, whether it's China or Pakistan, we seriously need new thinking.
And in this gap steps in Shashi Tharoor, do you think? As an ambassador at large or something?
Oh, Shashi's had a ball. I mean, I can see he's enjoying himself. He's been in the world of diplomacy all his life. He was with the United Nations. He has friends around the world. He contested to be the UN Secretary General and got a significant number of votes. He contested to be Congress President. So he has a certain profile
Right. Mm.
which he carries well on his shoulders. But that doesn't mean that India's status has gone up because Shashi Tharoor is able to meet people, shake hands, and have a good time. That somehow
Mm.
the rest of the world is taking India more seriously.
But then you also talked about the soft power of both the nations, and you made a very good point where you said the Pakistan's elite, are better at conveying their narrative than perhaps the Indian, the new middle class. That, in fact, that actually reminds me of one of the books you wrote about the
That's
new
right.
power elite. I think that was somewhat along similar lines.
That's right, and I think this is significant. I think the I'm not the only one saying it. There are a lot
Mm.
of people around the world who have said this. I've heard this said in the last 5 6 years, particularly from people I know in the West, in Asia, in normal conversations. That your the quality of your diplomacy is going down. The kind of people we now interact with are no longer at the kind of in the past, and I think there are good reasons for that because
Mm.
in this business of the civil services exam, first of all, it is not yet it is still not attracting the, the best and the brightest from what I would call the elite classes. But a lot of people are coming in thanks to the competitive nature of the examination. But I think our system now, where we have the same exam for someone who's going to be an income tax officer or a police officer and a diplomat, you know, and then just because of marks, you can go here or there. I think it's a flawed system. I think you need to have some special training qualifications to be able to attract people of some, you know, what you might call, Marxist would call class confidence into the
Right.
diplomatic world. And Pakistan there has had it's a very feudal society. It's a very
Mm.
unequal society. I'm not recommending that we should be like them. In fact, our strength is our middle class, But in some ways, that has become also a weakness because it is a new middle class that does well in a range of professions that is very more entrepreneurial, aspirational. But diplomacy is a different game, and I think that is where we are losing out to countries which are able to put out far more sophisticated ways of dealing with the rest of the world.
I'm going to come back and hold on to that thought and also talk a bit about your upcoming book, but after a quick break. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to a cover story conversation with Dr. Sanjay Baru. We're here talking about India, Pakistan, but now I want to shift focus just a bit and talk about your book that is coming out at the end of the month. It's you're talking about it's called The Succession of the Successful, and I don't know if you have an advanced copy with you. If you could show it to our viewers also. You're
Well, let
talking.
so
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, tell us
no,
what it's about.
you mentioned my earlier book, India's Power Elite, which
Hmm.
was published in 2021. And if you recall, the last chapter of that book was in fact called Secession of the Successful. And I drew attention to the growing out migration or emigration of India's elite, particularly
Hmm.
children of businessmen, children of senior government officials, senior diplomats, ministers, etc., etc. That the next generation of the Indian elite is leaving the country. And
Right.
today, if you take all the top decision makers in the country, in government and in business, and you look at where are the children, most of them are outside the country, right? So I just drew attention to that phenomenon.
Okay.
Then I was persuaded to write a whole book on this.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
and the book is here. I've got my
Oh,
own
you got the
copy.
advanced copy. Excellent.
Yes, it's called Secession of the Successful: The Flight
Okay.
Out of New India.
I
And
like the cover.
thank you. The point I make in this book, Priya, is that we have had three waves, if you like, of significant migration. I mean, migration is a universal phenomenon, historical phenomenon, and Indians have migrated for centuries, over 1,000 years or
Hmm.
thousands of years. But in the recent past, we've had three waves. The first wave happened during the British rule when thousands and thousands of Indians were taken away as labor to British colonies, to Fiji, Mauritius, Trinidad, Tobago, Guyana, etc., for sugar plantations, rubber plantations, etc. Uh, the second phase of significant migration begins with the oil boom in Gulf, with a large number of Indians going to the Middle East or Gulf or West Asia to work there. Uh, and along with that, in the same time, which is the 70s and 80s, a trickle begins of rising out migration to the West, particularly to the United States.
Hmm.
And I make the point that when this began in the 70s, economists in India were seriously concerned about brain drain. And there was a huge debate among economists, what should we do? It's all right if workers go and work outside because they're not getting jobs here. But what happens when doctors and scientists and mathematicians and engineers and all your bright young people start going abroad? It was an issue for policymakers to talk about. Today, nobody talks about it, right? When in fact, far bigger numbers are leaving. And then I make the argument that Indians are actually contributing to the development of developed countries. I
Hmm.
mean, when Donald Trump talks about MAGA, Make America Great Again,
Great.
I have a chapter titled Indians' Role in MAGA. And you look at the number of Indians contributing to making America great again, right?
Right.
So
Hmm.
this book really is focusing on this recent wave of elite, what I call elite migration, and a number of Indians. Yeah, but nobody talks about it. It's not a policy issue. On the other hand, recently, the government of India gave its support to a private initiative called GATI, GATI, which is Global Access for Talented Indians, which is
Hmm.
actually promoting sending talented
People to
Indians
work.
out. So,
Need to
so that
reverse that. But you said there are no policies. But is it do you see the numbers increasing in the last 15 years? Is this a Congress's BJP thing, or is just a moment in time? Is it because of the we don't have enough colleges in India, which is why people go for studies and then they stay on? or the policies are not conducive to staying here?
Well, it's a mix of everything, you know. So
Hmm.
I think the phenomenon really took off in the last 10 years. The data is there. The number of Indians giving up Indian citizenship has gone up sharply.
Ah,
The number of Indian millionaires moving out of India, buying golden visas and becoming citizens of other countries has risen sharply. So the data suggests a acceleration in the trend. The trend was there for some time. I'm not making it a Congress versus BJP or whatever, but I think it is certainly a rising trend in
hmm.
the last, particularly in the last 6 7 years, and after COVID even more. And today, it's very difficult to find young people in most cities who don't want to go abroad. In fact, if they can, they do. It may be becoming difficult increasingly because of restrictions on immigration. But the fact is that if they can, they still want to go out. And we are making it increasingly easy by giving
Oh,
financial support, by creating new schools that teach you to go abroad,
correct.
and this is a big business. So, and I've discussed all that in my book.
And have you suggested ways to reverse it?
Well, I think the only way you can reverse it is by continuing to focus on our own economic development and creating opportunities at home. you know we've seen in other countries. I mean, China, Korea saw migration of people in the 70s, 80s, and now there's reverse migration because these countries are doing well, people are going back. So unless we do well, yeah, at home economically, and I think also be more open to outsiders. I mean, a lot of, I know individual cases, but this keeps news stories keep appearing. Someone decides to come back to India, lives here for 6 months, and finds it impossible to function. You know, uh,
Yes,
getting a getting electricity connection, getting a gas connection, or just getting an Aadhaar card, or just about everything is tedious. And then you say, what the hell? I mean, why am I doing all this when my
mm,
life back in the US or in Australia was so much more comfortable? So unless you make, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced in his Independence Day speech in August 2024 uh, that he is going to launch a mission for ease of living. And
yeah,
earlier we talked about ease of business. He said we'll launch a mission for ease of living. I don't know what has happened to that mission, but that is what we need. We need ease of living. I mean, I'm now a senior citizen at 71, and routine economic actions require so much more energy. You know,
correct.
you have to stand in queues. You have to, go again and again to the same person to get something done. It's not
And the
easy.
KYCs, I don't know
A
how many.
headache.
Yeah.
Dealing with banks and KYCs
Mm.
is a bloody headache. And I think my friend Sucheta Dalal has been campaigning against this, but no action.
No, I agree with you. In fact, I'm looking forward to that book and for a further conversation. But on the point on the economy, we just got the data that India is now, overtaken Japan in terms of GDP. We are now the fourth largest economy. So your
No,
reaction to
no.
that? No?
Well, first of all, I think factually that's not correct. My friend BVR Subramaniam jumped the gun and made that announcement, the CEO of
It's
Niti Aayog. But I think Arvind Virmani immediately corrected him that this is likely to happen at the end of the
hmm.
year. And that the difference, of course, is a few dollars. Where we are 4 point something, and Japan is 4 point something. But the thing about this whole business of whether you're third largest, fourth largest is, I wrote a column on this. Go back to what Manmohan Singh said in 1991
It
in
is.
his famous budget speech. He said
Hmm.
the rise of India, is a idea whose time has
Ideal
come.
stand.
His time has come. So India has been rising. Our share of world trade has been growing. Our share of world income has been rising, etc., etc. So we will continue to rise. That's not the issue. The issue really is, how well are we doing at home in terms of inclusive growth? How many people have jobs? Why are so many people willing to work in Israel where there's a war? You
Hmm.
know, why you have these hundreds of Indians willing to go and work in a place like Israel because the Israelis are throwing out Palestinian workers? What does that tell you? It tells you that people are willing to go to the war zone because they'll get more money than live back home, whether in Gujarat or Haryana or UP, from where most of them are going.
Okay, so my final question to you is, there's been 11, years of Modi government. So where do you see, in terms of the achievements, we've heard them talk about it, but how would you assess it in a few words?
Look, India is doing well. India will continue to do well. I don't think that is the real issue. The issue are two things. One is, the growth process has to be far more inclusive. Creating jobs for the unemployed, etc. But the second thing is really to deal with political, tensions at home arising out of inequalities or range of inequalities, and this whole targeting of minorities or whatever. I mean, this whole culture that has come into play is not good for the country, and we will do even better, if everybody feels equally involved in this process.
So given that the message post Pahalgam was a positive one in the sense that how
That's right.
everybody came together and,
That,
uh,
that's
you know,
that's right. But then there also it was mixed with all kinds of other slogans. So we need to have clarity. We need to have clarity on what is our priority. Our priority is to really pursue inclusive economic growth across the country so that every citizen feels that is part of a rising India and not just one section of the people. As simple as that.
as simple as that, and spoken very effectively. Thank you so much, Dr. Baru, and I hope to have another conversation with you when your book comes out. But for now, thank you for this.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.